Welcome to the program. My guest is my friend Herman Schwartz. Herman teaches in the Department of Politics at the University of Virginia, and his latest must-read book is Subprime Nation. Herman studies the intersection of politics, policy, and the economy. Welcome back to the program.
Thanks,
sir.
Coy.
Very glad you're here. So let's talk money. Let's talk politics. I want to start with, give us a sketch, Herman, of where we are at this moment in time in 2017, so many years on from the meltdown of 07, 08. What's the economy look like?
Okay, we're basically a decade out from that. Housing prices started to turn down in 2006, and the first bank failures were 2007. So right now we're essentially a decade away. Those bank failures produced the biggest, worst recession in American history since the Great Depression. Unemployment over 10%, 10 million households foreclosed, a massive drop in automobile production, a massive drop in capacity utilization and profits for big firms, almost 2/3 drop in the stock market. So pretty brutal recession. Where we are now is a kind of recovery from all that. So obviously the stock market is way up, and that's because corporate profits have recovered. Growth is occurring, but not at the levels we had in the early 2000s. So GDP growth right now has been running about 2% a year. There's some indications it might go a little bit higher, and that looks good from the perspective of 2008, where GDP growth was negative. It looks good from the perspective of 2010 and 11, when it was about 1%. But relative to the 1990s, when we had 3.5% growth a year, it looks pretty bad. And in turn, what that means is that on the thing that really most people care about, which is, do they have a job and are they making money, things still haven't really recovered. Unemployment is down, so on the job side, more people are back to work. But without going into the details, we're basically still about 2 percentage points, which is around 3 million people, 2 percentage points away from full employment, even though officially the unemployment rate is now around 4.5%. That doesn't take into account the number of people who aren't looking for jobs because they can't get a job, and so what we call discouraged workers. So on the broader measure of unemployment, that takes account of workers who'd like to have a job but have given up looking for one, or who would have a part-time job and want a full-time job, we're still short. And because of that—
Or they have a full-time job that still doesn't pay the bills.
Well, that's the next thing, is the wages haven't come up. So sometimes they have 2 full-time jobs and they're not making enough money because wage growth basically is flat from 2008 forward.
Yeah, I read somewhere recently that the average American worker, the buying power of the average American worker is on par with the 1970s, that we really haven't seen a tremendous growth in the power of the American purchaser to really benefit from the market.
Yeah, well, there is no average person in this sense, but if you say the bottom 50% of the workforce has seen no real increase in purchasing power since the early 1970s. And if you segment that more, so workers with high school education, male workers with high school education or less, have actually seen a decline in their wages in terms of purchasing power since the 1970s. The big winners in the last 40 years, and actually the big winners in the last 10 years, the top 20%, and then within the top 20%, the top 10, and within the top 10, the top 1. And what that translates into is enormous differences in terms of quote unquote winning.
Right.
If you're between income percentile 80 and 90, which puts you roughly at household incomes of around $100,000 to $110,000, what you've seen is an increase in income of about $10,000 over the last 10 years. But if you're in income deciles 90 to 95, which puts you between like 150, 250, you've seen an increase of around $30,000 or $40,000 in those last 10 years. And if you're above that, you've seen huge increases on the order of $100,000. And if you're in the 1% or the 0.1%, we're talking millions of dollars of increase. So even within that top 20% that's done well, it's very concentrated at the top.
So that means that the uber wealthy are continue to reap the benefits that this economy has.
Yeah, and actually, if you want to say the Uber, actually, it captures this exactly. The people who own the stock of Uber have done really well, and it's the people who founded Uber have done really well, but the people who are driving for Uber are, on average, making less than minimum wage. So for them, what that means, those people who are driving for Uber, most of them, what that means is, this is money I need simply to get by, and I'll take any wage, any kind of opportunity to make that, because otherwise I'm not eating, I'm not paying my rent, and I'm going under. So that's the kind of economy we have now, is a kind of Uber economy. A lot of money at the top, a very small number of people.
And an increasing amount of money at the top. And it seems to me the whole thing is built on, I was reading recently about the FIRE economy, finance, insurance, real estate, that it's all based on debt service. And when we talk about the rich getting richer, and that's really not the way to put it. The rich are getting unbelievably richer.
Yes.
And it's all based on debt service, whether it's personal debt service or the debt service of the government or a local government.
Right. Well, of course, as a professor, I have to say it's a little more complicated than that.
Yes, of course.
So here's the two extra pieces. The big winners in today's economy are so when you think about people's incomes comes from companies. Money doesn't just fall out of the sky. People have jobs or they own shares in companies. They own stock in companies. That's where the money comes from. So we got to look at companies. And when you look at companies, what you see is a handful of companies are making all the profits. And what distinguishes that handful of companies is they have some kind of government-created or supported monopoly. So these are firms that possess robust intellectual property rights. And an intellectual property right is a patent, a trademark, a copyright, a brand. So the big profitable companies these days are the companies like Apple that have copyright on software, companies like Pfizer that have patents on drugs, companies like Procter & Gamble that have strong brand and trademark. And when you look at these companies, what you see is that all these companies have accumulated enormous piles of cash. And this means two things. The first thing is, one, there's enormous income inequality among companies. And I don't feel bad for companies, right? We should feel bad for people. But because there's enormous income inequality for companies, which is a handful of companies getting most of the profits, those companies accumulate these big piles of cash. So American firms today are sitting on about $2.5 trillion of cash. Most of that is the top 50 firms. It's not even the whole S&P 500. It's just the top 50 within the S&P 500.
And it's money that's not even going back into the economy, really,
here's
right?
the second thing. What do they do with that money?
Right, where is it?
It doesn't just sit. So the money ends up in the banking system, and that's the connection to your debt. The money has to be loaned out to somebody. And this is what produces, okay, the banks have money, who are we going to lend to? Well, we've got to push money into subprime lending for autos. We have to push money into student loans, which are now $4 trillion of debt. We have to push money into housing again, which in a way is a good thing, because the recovery of the housing market is another thing that's happened since the crash, and that's a good thing. But it does create all this debt. And then, of course, people only loan you money to get interest back. And so for the average person on the other side of the equation, what that means is a bigger and bigger proportion of their income is going to debt service.
Yeah.
Even though we're down from as a percentage of income, debt service was higher 2008 to 2010, but that was because, right, there's a numerator and a denominator here, and the denominator, people's income, dropped sharply in that period. It's now recovered a bit, and the actual level of debt service has come down a bit. So households are on a little bit better footing, but they still have very high levels of debt service. And again, the typical household is spending about 12% of income on debt service.
Oh my gosh.
So that's what makes the economy weak. And we can think about this again, two different channels. If I'm giving $12 out of every 100 I earn back in interest, that's money I can't spend.
Yeah.
So
that's money you're not spending on a new car. That's money you're not spending to go out to eat or to the movies or build your local economy.
Right, or food or haircuts or all these things that give other people cash. And at the same time, you've got companies, and the banks are getting all this interest money back. And again, they have to lend it out, which makes more debt. And the question is, why don't the companies invest? And the answer is, the companies that are getting all these profits don't really have to invest to continue their business model. They have a patent, or they have a trademark.
They're using the power of government.
They've got a monopoly
to lock in
and if
profits.
you think about Apple as a company, what does it mean when they invest? They hire a few more coders, but they're not doing what the companies that produce physical goods do, which is build factories, which employs people to build them, to fill them full of machines, which employs more people to make the machines, and therefore generates a lot of growth. You pay 10 coders a little bit more money. What they do is they go out and they have yuppie brunch on Sunday, or they bid up the price of housing in places like Silicon Valley, which is where they live.
Or Charlottesville, Virginia.
A little bit less so, but there is some of that here too. Yeah. So that's the big problem.
Right.
And so from the consumer side, the problem is debt. But on the investment side, the problem is the companies with the money aren't making investments in the sense of new productive investment. What they're doing is handing the money to the banks to be passive investment where they're just loaning money to consumers.
Herman, let me ask you this. You mentioned machines. And I want to connect the dots between the realities that we've seen in the production economy, the displacement of workers by AI, artificial intelligence, and machines, and the election of Donald Trump. Because Trump ran on telling all of these people, you know, I'm going to make America great again because I'm going to bring your job back. And the implication is that your job went somewhere, that somebody else in the world is actually doing the job, somebody in Malaysia or China is doing the job you used to do, when in fact the reality says, no, most likely that job's being done by a machine, or an economy of scale eliminated the job, but it's not necessarily being done by somebody else. Help us understand that transformation, because we're seeing a huge displacement of blue-collar workers, and we're now starting to see it in the white-collar fields. And from what I've read, we're only going to see more and more displacement of very well-educated white-collar workers. Their job's going to be taken by a machine.
Okay, so there's two things here. One of them was that was then, this is now. And that was then part actually is the trade story. The opening of the American market to imports from China, which means a massive increase in imports by American firms into America. Chinese imports have to get here somehow, and Walmart alone is responsible for 10% of Chinese exports to the US.
Wow.
That did displace a lot of workers. That's responsible for about 6 million jobs. It's non-trivial. And those jobs started out mostly being jobs that were displaced in the American South because it was clothing. But from about 2003 forward, it was the manufacturing economy in the sense of things like hand tools, household goods, and car parts. And that's really the Midwest story, and that's the Trump story. So Trump isn't wrong to say there was a huge problem in the opening up of trade with China. NAFTA, much less of a problem than he says. It's really China. China was about 6 million jobs, and precisely in the places where Trump had his unexpectedly high vote shares. Michigan, Wisconsin, Indiana.
Western Pennsylvania. His message was resonating with these workers.
Because those folks did lose jobs, and they didn't get anything better when they lost those jobs. The this is now part is the automation story. And two pieces here also. One piece is, well, how do we compete with China? Chinese wages are a fraction of US wages. Typical wage in American manufacturing, about $26 an hour, $25 an hour. Typical wage in China, you'd be lucky in the old days, like in the early 2000s, to be making $3 or $4 a day.
Wow.
Wages have come up, and of course it costs you money to ship from China. So basically, the cost of production between China and the US has equalized now. But that's partly because firms made massive investments in automation to make American workers more productive. Because the cost of production is not just wages, but it's wages relative to productivity.
Right.
So automation is now the big cause of job loss. And here the math is actually pretty simple. Not to make product advertisement, but there's a robot called Baxter Robot. And the Baxter Robot, as a basic unit, costs about $22,000. And with software, extra tooling, service contract, let's just say for the sake of argument, it costs $48,000. Okay, so that's one number, $48,000. Baxter is actually pretty simple, easy to program. You or I can make it work. And it can do simple jobs like, here comes a bunch of gears down a conveyor belt that someone else has machined upstream, and I'm going to put them in a box. And in the old days, you'd have a person at minimum wage picking them up and putting them in the box.
Right.
Baxter can do that. So why would you hire Baxter at $48,000 instead of someone at minimum wage? Here's the math. You hire someone at minimum wage, all in, because there's employer-side taxes and unemployment contributions, maybe it costs you $8 an hour. If that person is working 50 weeks a year at 40 hours, it costs you $16,000. So you might think, Baxter, 3 times as expensive as this minimum wage worker. But that's not how it works. Because, right, maybe you're running 2 shifts. So now it's Baxter is 1.5 times 48 versus 32, okay? And then Baxter has a lot of advantages from the employer point of view. Baxter doesn't come to work drunk. Baxter doesn't call up and say, I'm sick. Baxter isn't distracted by all the normal problems. Baxter doesn't want to unionize. Baxter doesn't sue you for various problems. And also, you've bought Baxter. That's a one-time deal. So in the first year, $48,000. But by the second year, those 2 workers are now costing you $64,000, 4 times 16. And so you're ahead. So for this very basic unskilled work, this very simple bit of automation now eliminates the need for a goodly number of people. You still need some people around to supervise those robots, and you need to hire someone to maintain them. Well, that's built into the service contract.
Yeah, yeah.
But the rest, they're going. So those jobs are going.
And we're seeing more and more of that kind of thing, right?
And that's going to affect everybody upstream as well.
Yeah.
You're going to have more smart manufacturing. So the Germans and the consulting industry call this Industry 4.0. And what they mean by Industry 4.0 is the ability to do mass production that's customized for the end user with smart machines. And the image you should have here is a product order comes in to the manufacturer, who automatically transmits through the internet orders to the parts suppliers. Everything comes in barcoded. The parts supplier has a cassette of parts for your production line. Every part has a barcode. They're all in order because you've optimized your flow of production. And there's an RFID, a radio frequency chip, attached to the main assembly box that tells the machine that's doing the operation, pick this particular component with this barcode and put it in this place. So you've eliminated people, you've eliminated errors. As long as the machine is precise, you've eliminated defects. And you still need some hand labor here and there, but basically a lot of the old hand labor, which was people looking and checking, is this the right part for this product? That's gone. And this means that manufacturing jobs are going to shrink even more. Now I have to say, that's a good thing. Factory work, for people, I'll say our age, you're a young guy still, but an old guy like me, but factory work, when we were kids, was really brutal. Monotonous, boring, dangerous. We say dirty, dull, dangerous, and demeaning, the 4 Ds. By the time you get to the 1990s, it's less so because there's a little bit of automation, and that's a good thing. We want to take the backbreaking physical labor out of manufacturing work. And actually, we want to take the cost out of manufacturing because from our point of view, it's great that things are now cheaper, right? It means we have to work less to buy those things. What didn't happen when that occurred, right? When that good thing occurred, when automation replaced people, what didn't happen was a reduction in work hours. What didn't happen was, or anyway, a voluntary reduction in work hours, right? People lost jobs. What didn't happen was some way to transform the increased productivity into a better standard of living for the average person.
Right.
And that's the stagnant wages story, right? We would have a different economy if the government had said, we were going to redefine a full-time work week from 40 hours to 30 hours. And we're going to redefine the threshold for benefits from 30 hours to 20 hours.
Yeah, yeah.
Then you'd have people working less, still having benefits, somewhat higher wages.
But still able to afford that.
Right, because the reduction in work hours would have kept labor markets relatively tight.
Let me ask you about that displacement of the worker that we're only going to see more and more of in the future. There's been now real serious talk about national salaries, where the government says, look, there aren't any jobs for these millions of people, so we're just going to give you a lump sum of money because we want you to spend that money in the economy. That's how the economy functions. Where is that conversation now, and what does it mean?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So this goes under a number of different names. One is universal basic income. One is a citizen right income. I'm going to use the universal basic income label. And the idea is that by virtue of being a citizen, you should have some minimum socially defined standard of living. Socially defined means what do we think an American should have as a basic package of consumption: food, shelter, communication, some access to transportation. So we can put a number on that. And so a socially defined minimum standard of income. Then the question is, why would you get that? Well, you're a citizen, and there's different flavors here. One would be simply by virtue of being a citizen, whether you work or not, you get this, okay? Another version is that you have to do some kind of work effort to get it. I think politically, in America, we probably will end up with something like the second version.
Right.
There's versions of the first version being done in Scandinavia and in Finland, and also in Ontario, Canada, where they're simply saying, here's a minimum income, on the probably correct theory that in those societies, people will go to work anyway, because, right, if you're only getting this and by a little bit of work you can get that, you're going to do it.
And from the government's perspective, that's more money coming back into the economy because you're going to go out to eat, you're going to buy that washer and dryer.
Right. Yeah. And as your income goes up, you're going to pay taxes anyway.
Yeah.
And that, by the way, is the answer to the question of, well, why would we give a basic income to somebody like Warren Buffett who has $1 billion? Well, it's going to come back as taxes, so it washes out. And this also allows for the elimination of, in both versions, it allows for the elimination of a whole set of complicated welfare bureaucracies at the state level and somewhat less complicated bureaucracies at the federal level. And that's bad for those people as workers, but from the point of view of the people trying to access those benefits, it's a good thing, because this is, by design, these are very deliberately created as complicated, difficult to navigate, and often humiliating processes. So in America, the probable model here would be you must have some work effort to get this minimum income. And we already have a model of that called the Earned Income Tax Credit, which basically says if you're working and you have children and you're over 25 years old, the government will give you a tax refund above and beyond any taxes you might make. So it's a refundable tax credit that brings you up to a minimum threshold. So the more children you have, the more money you would get, obviously. And then it phases out at around $48,000 for a family of 4. So we already have a version of this.
Right.
So in the American model, in the most extreme version, what could be done is to say, if you're working, because we're going to make this a citizen right, we would get rid of the children requirement and maybe the age requirement. But if you're working and you're over 18,
simplify it. Yeah.
Right, simplify it. You're working, you're over 18. We will send you a check every month, and we'll settle up at the end like we do for everybody's taxes. If you've made too much or too little, if you made too little, we give you a bit more. If you've made too much, we take some of it back as taxes. But we give you this minimum income, and you qualify as long as you have taxable income for the year, which is, again, think about the good things here. People have to work. That's good, because we want people to work, and people are better off when they're working. They feel better. It puts people into the legal economy. You can't do this if you're off in the black market. That's a good thing. It gives people some stability of income, so they know from month to month they're going to have some cash. And the biggest problem for poor people is erratic cash flows. They can't buy cars, they can't buy things on credit with erratic cash flows. Sure. And it puts more money in their pocket to spend in the economy. So this is all good. And the other thing is this could replace a whole bunch of programs that right now are fragmented across the states and over a number of
Herman, let me ask you about, I definitely wanted to ask you as well about what should we understand about Trump's budget proposal, which on the face of it, it looks like, you want to strip money out of education and social programs and the arts and science, and you want to put it in war. And at the same time, you want to continue to make the rich richer.
Right. So the first two things that matter about Trump's budget proposal is that the president proposes, but it's Congress that disposes. Congress has to pass the budget. So Trump can say anything he wants, and if Congress doesn't pass that or adopt it as their budget, nothing happens. It's Congress that appropriates money, and in particular, the House. Second thing is Trump's proposal is very much lacking in detail, aside from these broad brush things. So keep that in mind, and then we can talk about what the effects are, but I have to say it's very unlikely it will get through. And the reason is it's Congress that passes that budget, and every single one of those programs sends money to some congressperson's district.
Yeah.
So take, for example, something that seems completely crazy politically. Trump's voters, one big chunk of Trump's voters are in Appalachia, and what would be zeroed out in this budget proposal from Trump is the Appalachian Development funding, which takes an enormous amount of money out of what is actually one of America's poorest regions. And Mitch McConnell, who's the majority leader in the Senate, who's from Kentucky, has flatly said there's no way that the funding for Appalachia is going to go away.
But those Republicans in Congress love the idea of tax cuts for the rich.
Right. But their problem there is the budget rules say you can't, that tax cuts have to be revenue neutral. You can't cut taxes without also cutting spending. In a normal budget bill. And so to get this through the Congress in a normal budget bill, they're going to need 60 votes. And again, that means they're going to have to get 10 Democratic senators. Good luck. To do it through reconciliation, what's called reconciliation, they can do it with 51 votes, but there you have to have offset. If you cut taxes, you have to cut spending. So finding places to cut spending is not so easy.
Right.
So I think pretty much, I wouldn't say it's DOA, because you never know in Washington, but it seems...
Doesn't look good.
Yeah, I would say it's on life support at best.
Yeah, Herman, we only got about a minute left, but what can we leave people with that we really should be paying attention to? When we talk about, keep your eye on the bouncing ball, what's the ball and where's it bouncing? What should we be watching?
In the economy, there's only two things that matter right now. One is the now and one is the future. The now is income is too concentrated at the top. So there has to be some kind of tax reform that shifts.
And societies don't last.
Yeah, they break down.
When they keep doing that too long.
They break down.
Yeah.
And the second thing is we're, as we say, eating our seed corn. Cutting science spending destroys the economy 20 years in the future. We can talk about this more in the second half, but everything that we enjoy today in terms of high technology, it came out of government-funded R&D efforts 20 to 25 years ago. So if those programs are cut, as the Trump budget proposes, we're basically cutting the throats of everyone who's not, everyone who's under the age of, let's say, 25, or everyone who's under the age of 50 or 55.
Yeah.
Because they're going to end up working or retiring in an economy that's not substantially richer than the one we have now.
Yeah. Herman, thank you so much for being here, for the work you do. Herman Schwartz is at the University of Virginia, and I promise you, you will not be sorry when you go out and get his book, Subprime Nation. You can find a complete archive of this program online at mediaandcitizenship.org. Have a terrific week, and y'all be good to each other.